You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year, starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
And we're to episode 7.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Lucky number 7.
Finally. 7 a lucky number?
Yeah.
Huh. Do you have a lucky number?
I don't have a lucky number, but I do like the number 8 for unusual reasons. But I'm unusual. I like it because it's symmetrical.
I like the number 3.
Why?
I don't know, but like so a lot of y'all don't know, but I actually am OCD.
Very.
And so one of my things is numbers, and I like synchronicities and numbers, and I've ended up figuring out that 3s are a number that I like. So not to pinpoint my location, but my address is 210, right? Mm-hmm. So if you add the 1 and the 2, you get 3. But if you add the 2 to 10, you get 12, right? Uh-huh. Well, you can take 12 and you can divide it by 3, and then it goes to 4. And if you divide 4 by 2, then it goes to 2. I'm very, very weird.
Well, there's another reason I like the 8.
So I like numbers that can divide by 3 or 2.
Okay.
But I do it in my head all the time, like with any number. Like I could look at the time and I could do it. And that's like apparently a coping mechanism for people with OCD.
That's why you got excited when it was 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Earlier we were recording and Leo was like, it's 12:34. And I was like, oh, that's a synchronicity number. Like it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's exciting. So
yes, she gasped and I thought something was wrong with like the sound. And no, she was, I like it when it's 1, 2, 3, 4 because it lines up. But the other reason I like the number 8 is because it looks like a snowman.
I could see that. I could see why you would like that.
That's just, and it's even. I like even numbers.
See, I don't necessarily dislike or like even or odd numbers. It's just weird. I don't know. So anyways, I was telling my therapist one time about like, oh yeah, like I do this thing with numbers and like I do this and this. And he goes, yeah, that's an OCD trait. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, it's like a calming thing for people who have OCD and anxiety. And he said, it's your way of making sense of something around you.
Oh,
and he said, it's your way of controlling different things. He said, like time or different locations. He said, it's your way subconsciously of controlling that space around you.
That is very interesting. Nothing about numbers is calming to me.
So my old address was 103.
Oh.
So if you add 1 and you add 3, you get 4, and you can divide it by 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I didn't like adding the 10 to the 3 because that'd be 13, and that doesn't divide by anything.
But
it's very upsetting.
I will say every address that I've lived at has been an even number.
But I did like that even if it was 13, so even with numbers, if you look at a 13, you take the 1, you add it to the 3, that's 4. Still divide it by 2. I look at numbers that way too.
There you go. We started off on a rabbit trail.
We really did. Sorry, guys. Anyway, supposedly,
this is
7's a lucky number, and we're on episode 7. You guys have been picking up some traction on our downloads.
And we appreciate that.
We very much appreciate it. And y'all are clearly telling people about our podcast because we got listeners everywhere. Everywhere.
And we are okay with that.
Like, we now have another listener in London.
Awesome.
So if you're listening, yes, I saw your download. We've got we've got multiples in California. Somebody in the Bronx. So, yes. Just Atlanta. I don't know who found us in Atlanta, but hi, because y'all have been loving our podcast. Yes. Because that's the number one area that our podcast is downloaded is Atlanta.
And we'll be at the Fox in August. I'm just saying.
Oh, yes, we will be at the Fox. But it's just so crazy. So, we appreciate it so much. Y'all are clearly telling people about the podcast, and y'all are finding it however you're finding it.
We're not performing at the Fox. I want to clarify that.
One day, people, one day we will do a live show at the Fox and I will die. I'll walk out on stage and just collapse. That's what'll happen.
Yes.
But yeah, so thanks, guys. We appreciate it so much. And as we are in episode 7, we are going to be talking about Marcus Lyon, Dominic Daley, and James Halligan. And this is Halligan. And this is our episode for 1805. Also, I just looked at the clock and it's 1:11, which pleases me. Equals 3. Anyways, welcome to recording with me, guys. So this episode this week is pretty interesting. We are going to deal with some prejudice, which it's not, obviously, I was about to say, which prejudice isn't great, duh.
Just want to throw it out there.
Just want to throw that out there. But this is an interesting case of kind of the religious prejudice that was going on in the country at this time. So it's very interesting, and we'll get into it, and I'm sure we'll have some good discussion about it. So we're going to go to our sources. Of course, always Wikipedia. God, such a good site. I always remember in high school, Leah doesn't remember this. When I was in high school.
Shut your face.
When we had to do research papers. When we had to do research papers, our teachers were always like, Wikipedia is not a source. It is not a source. Don't use Wikipedia. And now everybody's like, I found it on Wikipedia. And it's like, tracks.
When I was in high school, we were inventing how to cite off of the World Wide Web. Just saying.
Such a dark time. Anyways.
And I had to type my papers in my parents' bedroom on the computer.
Hey, I had to do that for a while. Anyway, so we got Wikipedia, we got the Encyclopedia Britannica website, website called Executed Today.
Executed Today. That's interesting.
And then this is I don't want to say paper. It's not really like a research paper or something, but it was a document called The Murder Trial of Halligan and Daley, Northampton, Massachusetts, by the Honorable Robert Sullivan, Associate Justice of Massachusetts Supreme Court.
Well, honorable.
I love it. The Honorable Robert Sullivan presiding.
You can't say that without a southern accent.
I know, which is funny because they're in Massachusetts. Not anywhere close.
But it gives you that Savannah accent when you say it.
But I did get a lot of info from that document. It was very in-depth, very good document to read, and had a lot of really good information for that time. It was written more, I won't say recently, not like within the past 10 years or so, but it was not written in 1805, which makes it
relatively
a lot more
current.
Readable for me. And yes, I did say Executed Today.
Yes.
That's the website. I'll explain it. So, as we've discussed in other episodes, it's real hard to find cases in these years. So, I kind of reverse engineer my searches, and as morbid as it is, this website called Executed Today lists all the people executed in a specific year. Okay. So what I do,
tell me who died or who was executed.
Pretty much. So it's saved to my bookmarks. Because what I have to do is I have to look at who was executed that year.
So, Brad, I've added another bookmark.
Yeah. My NSA agent, Brad, is like, what you doing over there?
Oh, so you added another.
You good?
Murderous side.
You don't look good. So, but the way that I have to do it is I have to look up on that website and see who was executed in a specific year, and then take their name, type it back into Google with the year to try and see if I can find a case.
See, I'm learning how she does her job. I'm just here to talk about it. That's all. I mean, people that I know are like, "Oh, I see you've got a podcast that is so cool," and I'm like, I mean, you can congratulate me, and I'm having a lot of fun. All I got to do is show up and talk. That's all I got to do. She does the hard stuff, and I'm loving it. I got my pretty pink headphones. I get to talk to the critters.
All the critters.
It's great.
Yeah, if y'all ever hear any scurrying in the background, it's either the cats or the dog.
Mm-hmm.
They're our mascots. And if you follow us on Instagram, which you should, you will see our research assistant, who I might be firing.
No, she's not allowed.
Claire. So yes, we have Claire, Knox, and Fletcher. Those are Fletcher's the dog, and then Claire and Knox are the cats. So if you ever hear anything in the background, it's just our mascots scurrying. So yeah, executedtoday.com. It's a good website. Good website. Good information. Which it's just interesting because I'll have to look it up, and then it'll tell you like why the person was executed, the day they were executed, and a bunch of stuff. And so it's interesting because you'll see what people are executed for, and not that it's ever funny that someone's executed.
It is interesting to see crimes, though. I think I might not enjoy. It might be interesting to see the different crimes.
It's like horse theft.
Which was a big deal, though.
Which was, but it's just so funny to go back and look and like, oh, horse theft. Okay.
But it might have been like repeated horse theft, or it may have been like a whole like corral full of horses.
Sorry, my mind went somewhere else for a second about horse. Anyways,
Look up your daughters and horses.
No.
Okay, continue on.
Oh goodness. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the events that were going on in 1805. We've got some interesting ones. January 11th, the Michigan Territory is created. April 27th, the United States and Berbers attack the Tripolitan at Tripoli. I can't say it because of what it's related to, and I don't know if it's Tripolitan. Anyway, city of Derna. And this is where the song Shores of Tripoli come from. From
to the
shores
of Tripoli.
We will fight our country's battles
on the land and on the sea.
We will fight for right and freedom. Anyways, if y'all
hey,
that is that. For those of you who don't know, that is the
Marines.
Yes, that's like the fight song, I guess,
it's the
is
Marines
the best.
Hymn.
Yeah,
each armed force has their own hymn.
So June 5th is the first recorded tornado in Tornado Alley, which was southern Illinois. I'm not sure if it's still 100% in the same area. Didn't Google that, honestly. Should have, but we're privy to our own Tornado Alley in Alabama. So June 11th, Detroit burned to the ground. Most of the city was destroyed, and that was the Great Fire of 1805. I think that's the one that started in a barn, and then it took like the whole city down.
No, that was Chicago.
Then what was it in Detroit? Nope, I think this one was started in a house. I read something on it, but that was Chicago, the Great Fire of Chicago. I'm getting them mixed up, which Detroit and Chicago, not the same place.
Nope.
Not even
different
close.
States.
So November 7th. Same country. Yes. We are in America. So same country, at least. There's that. November 7th, the Lewis and Clark expedition arrived at the Pacific Ocean.
Not specific, two different things.
Pacific.
That is one of my pet peeves. Oh, could you be more Pacific? Well, no, because that would
I could be
ocean.
more Atlantic. If you want me to. I'm a smart, so.
Alec.
Which, goodness. December 26th, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts was established in Philadelphia.
Somebody got a good Christmas gift.
So yeah, we finally made it through the events of 1805. Congrats. So on to our story. To murder. November 10th, 1805, Marcus Lyon's body is found in a stream near Springfield, Massachusetts.
Was he lying around? It was right there.
Jesus.
It was right there. I had to take it.
Guys, and she will take that back so hard when she finds out what happened to him.
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm really not.
Yes, Marcus Lyon. Okay. So April 24th of 1806, so the following April, it was November when he was found, April, the trial of Dominic Daley and James Halligan begins in Northampton, Massachusetts. And June 5th of 1806, Daley and Halligan were hanged for the murder of Marcus Lyon in front of a crowd of 15,000. We'll get to it. So, Springfield, Massachusetts was founded in 1636 as a agawam plantation under the administration of the Connecticut colony. This, quote, plantation is not a plantation. It's not the plantation you think of.
I kind of thought maybe it was not a happy place.
It's not that kind of plantation.
Okay.
Which is why I put plantation in quotes.
And
that's
you can't
what
see
they
air quotes this way.
Yeah, the quote plantation, because it was it kind of, the way that I've researched it, it was a location, but it was not. It was the name. It wasn't like, oh, that was a plantation. It was the agawam plantation. So, anyways, at this time, the General Court of Massachusetts protected the Agawam by colonial law, and the Agawam, like I said before, was an Indian tribe that was in this area. And along with that came the protection of the Agawam's land rights and their crops. Let's see, they were defended by the English colonials who inhabited the area, and the Agawam had an open invitation to enter Puritan homes in the area, and many times they would show up for dinner. So it's like, it's not at all what people think of, like, in that time, because people would always think that, like, the colonists and the Indians were against each other. And so it's so funny to hear this story of them, like,
they were friends.
Hi, come on in for dinner. Like, they would just show up.
That's how you want it to be.
It is. It's so wholesome.
It really is. That's how you want Thanksgiving to be.
So in 1641, the town was renamed Springfield and joined the Massachusetts Bay Colony as an agriculture and trading post. Later, the town would be a stop on the Underground Railroad. Ooh. And today, it is the largest city in Western New England. A few things that kind of came from this area were the first American dictionary, the first American gas-powered automobile, and the first machinery for interchangeable parts.
Interesting.
Yes. So interesting area. But I just love that story of they would just kind of pop in for dinner. Just a little pop over.
That smells good.
What you got? You got extra? Of course we have extra. Anyways, just love.
Add some water to the soup.
Yes. So this story is a little different, where a lot of other stories we kind of go through someone's life and then kind of go into how they died. And unfortunately, this story begins at the end of someone's life. Yes. And then the story goes from there. It was Saturday, November 9th of 1805, when a man named John Bliss found a horse in his pasture. This was pretty odd, considering that the horse still had on his saddle and bridle. And for anybody who's not familiar with horses, the bridle is the piece that goes around their head that usually has reins attached to it. So it's pretty uncommon, especially with bridles. You don't want to leave them on horses. It can be very, very dangerous. My parents have horses, so this is how I know this. But yeah, you don't want to leave the bridle on the horse. It's very dangerous to do that. So for someone to walk out to their pasture and see a horse with a saddle and a bridle on it with no one around.
That's not a responsible horse owner right there.
So the man tied the horse beside the road, and he just kind of hoped that the owner would come by, and it was a mare, so it was a she. So someone would come and pick her up, especially,
like, hey, got your horse.
Hey.
Here. Yeah.
Like, hey.
How's that?
Hey, like hey. Like hay for a horse. Hey.
Thanks for that.
What do you feed a horse? Hey. Anyways, sorry. We are slap happy today.
Oh my gosh.
Stick with us, guys. This could be an interesting episode.
Yucky weather.
This could be Muff Part 2.
Stop it.
Return of the Muff.
That is never to be spoken of again.
God, people love that episode. They love it. They think it's the funniest thing. My mom was talking about her friend who was listening to the show, and she was laughing so hard. And one of our coworkers was listening to it, and she came to my office and said that she was listening to it on her way to and from the lake, and she could not stop laughing. And this is somebody who also worked when me and Leo worked together every day. This is someone who worked with us every day. So she was like, I couldn't stop laughing.
Oh my gosh.
So
I've decided that that topic that you just said like 3 times that, I'm not going to say ever again. Since we both love Harry Potter, that shall now be She Who Shall Not Be Named. She Who Shall Not Be Named. That's what we shall say now.
The beaver that shall not
Stop
be named.
No, stop it. Stop it now.
I can't. I told you guys, stick in there. This is Muff Part 2, Return of the Muff.
Stop it. Tell her, Fletcher. Fletcher's giving her the eye.
My dog is sitting beside me, and he's like, can you people just get on with it? Anyways. So it was very odd that the horse was there, and so he tied her up to the fence post beside the road. And she still had also saddlebags on, and there was food inside of them and letters.
Oh.
So he knew
somebody was on a journey.
Somebody has to be looking for this horse. Nobody came by to claim her. So Bliss made his neighbors aware of the odd occurrence, and they decided that they would look around for anyone in distress, because surely that is the only reason, especially in this time.
Yeah, calamity has befallen someone.
Yeah, this is the only reason somebody's going to leave their horse is because something has happened to them. Eventually, the search came to the Chicopee River.
Chicopee? That's kind of fun to say.
Like a chickpea.
Yeah, but it has an
Chicopee, like a Chico stick. The Chicopee.
It's like Galinda with a gun.
So they got to the Chicopee River, and a coat could be seen in the shallow water.
I bet there was a body attached to that coat.
It was a man around 6 feet tall.
Was he lying in the river?
I can't, guys. Anyway.
I don't mean to make light of this gentleman's death.
So,
sorry.
Here is your trigger warning for this section. This is the only trigger warning in the show. This is a low-level description. So it's not too bad. It'll take us just about 30 seconds or so to get through, but it is going to kind of describe how he was found. So we're going to start it in 3, 2, 1. In the write-up by the Honorable Robert Sullivan, he stated, quote, "The upper part of the head over the cerebrum and over the left eye was indented, and the back part of his head had been smashed to a pulp. The ball of a small caliber pistol was lodged in his ribs. It was deduced from the appearance of the shrubbery in the area that the body had been dragged some distance before it was deposited in the shallows of the river. A large stone weighing 65 pounds had been placed on its head to prevent its rising."
Yikes.
And that's the end of the description for that. So if you were waiting for the wrap of that, that's the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty brutal way to find someone, especially if you're just trying to find somebody who, like, hey, did you lose your horse? And you walk up on that. That's pretty. So it wasn't really hard to find out who the man was by the letters that were found in the saddlebags of his horse, and it was Marcus Lyon. He was it was said that he was a respectable, quote, robust, a 6 foot tall, robust farmer from Woodstock, Connecticut. He was on his way to New York to get farm equipment for the upcoming summer. So keep in mind, this is in November. This is a farming area. So it is November, and he's going to New York to get farm equipment for the summer, which is not uncommon.
Right.
So he was seen November 9th riding his horse on a road between Boston and Springfield. Of course, Boston being Boston, Massachusetts. As soon as his body was found, the citizens of the town began an inquest where a 13-year-old boy testified that he had actually seen two men in the area on the day Lyon was seen riding his horse. The men, supposedly that this kid saw, were both wearing sailor's clothing, and one of them was carrying a bindle. So the little bindle. It's a stick with a handkerchief at the end you put over your shoulder.
Oh,
it's a bindle.
I've learned a new word.
A bindle.
A bindle.
So the governor.
A bundle.
So I wonder if that's where a bundle comes from.
Possible.
Because it's bundled up.
I mean, you have a bundle, but when you put on the stick, it becomes a bindle.
It's a bindle.
A bundle and a stick. A bindle.
Bindle. Interesting. That's what a bindle is. The more you know. The governor offered a reward of $500 for the identification of the murderers. Would you like to guess how much money that is? You're not good at this.
5,000.
No, it's more than that.
Okay. Ask me again.
$500 in 1805. What do you think? Come on.
$20,000.
$11,000. Just overshot it. $11,413 was the equivalent of $500 in that day. And
at least I didn't say 5,000.
True. And immediately the governor put this reward out for people to get. So this was pretty major sum of money for the time, and it's no surprise that people were extremely eager to find the men and collect that reward for themselves. One of these was a Major General Mattoon, who was High Sheriff of Hampshire County. It was said that he was, quote, greatly interested himself in measures to detect them. Unfortunately, even today, in cases like this where there's such a high reward or there's just a lot of sensationalism around what happened, it's not uncommon for people to start pointing a finger at others without having all the facts.
I'm shocked.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even thought of that happening.
It was Monday morning, the day after Lyon was found, when the sheriff formed a group of men together to try and find these supposed two men in sailor's garb. On Tuesday, the group brought in two men who, quote, fit the description.
I thought you said bit. I was like, what did they bite?
They bit it. Take a bite out of crime. McGruff. We're not related, guys.
But we are.
These men were Dominic Daley and James Halligan. They were found in a tavern along the same road that the 13-year-old boy said he saw the two men on walking before. Daley was in the bathroom shaving, which will come in to play later. That will become important.
Oh, I wonder if he had a long beard before.
No. And Halligan was in the kitchen. A newspaper at the time said, quote, when the arresting officers told the two Irishmen that they had a warrant for their arrest, Daley said, for what? They were told for murder. Both protested their innocence and related that they were traveling to New York from Boston, where they resided. Daley for the purpose of collecting a small sum of money due to him, and Halligan to visit his cousin there, end quote. The men were taken back to Springfield, where Lyon was found, and then moved to the county jail in Northampton. So, Dominic Daley and James Halligan were Irish immigrants who came to America around 1800. Daley was born around 1770 and Halligan around 1778, making the men 35 and 27, respectively, at the time of their arrest. Both of the men lived and worked in Boston once they immigrated, and according to one paper, Halligan had arrived only 6 months before he was arrested, but another said he had been in America for at least 4 years.
That's a little bit of a discrepancy there.
Big gap. Daley, the older of the two men, had come to the States about 2 years before, and he had a wife, a child, a mother, and a brother who all lived with him in the same home.
Whoa.
It's important to note a few other things going on in the area at this time. namely prejudice against Irish immigrants.
Oh, yeah. That was a big deal. That was a lot.
Yes. And that weighs heavily in this case, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the time of this case is right after the Revolutionary War, and in New England, many of the residents were British Protestants.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not at all.
Irish were Catholics.
Yep. It was not at all kept a secret that Protestants hated Roman Catholics, and there was a deep-seated rivalry just between the British, or the English, British, and Irish in general. That's
so sad to me too.
Yes,
so sad.
The rivalry was mainly in Europe, but it didn't prevent the prejudice from coming to America as Europeans immigrated over. In fact, and a lot of people who studied history in the United States, if you went to school here, this was a term that we did learn in school around this time. And it was even still 50 years, 50 after this case happened, that there were still job advertisements that specifically said no Irish need apply.
Mm-hmm.
So still 50 years after this case, they were still saying, we don't want Irish working here, which is really sad. So, and I know that Boston is an area where there are a lot of Irish immigrants. Even today, there's a lot of people who are there who do have Irish roots.
Boston Celtics.
Yes.
Which actually should be pronounced Celtic, but we're not going to go there. I'm not going to split the hairs, even though it bothers me, whatever. I mean, I'm Scottish, but still.
So, which is funny because I'm Irish. I have some Scottish in me, obviously, but
we're not related on that side.
No, but I have some Scottish, Irish, British. It's heavily British.
Yeah,
is what mine is. So,
well, I mean, half of me is
just
Scottish.
White. Just white.
Just white.
It's me. Just pale.
Yeah.
Just pale.
Just pasty.
Yep.
That's why
Translucent,
I'm pasty.
some may say.
Yes.
Casper-like.
It's porcelain, and we rock it.
It is.
Thank you.
So once the men were taken to jail, they were not allowed to talk to anyone except the appointed prosecutor for the Commonwealth.
Prosecutor?
His name was John Hooker. It's low-hanging fruit.
I mean, I just had to look away.
A paper in the area called the Hampshire Federalist published an editorial on January 7th of 1806, which described the reactions and feelings of the locals regarding the murder. Quote, that the minds of the good people should be shocked with the late murder of Marcus Lyon on the high road at noonday is perfectly natural and would be right to a certain extent. But the panic excited by this event goes to an extreme. It magnifies every assault to a manslaughter, every sudden or accidental death to a bloody assassination, end quote. So this reminds me of our first case when, with Levy Weeks, when the paper reported that Elma Sands had been willfully murdered. Remember that one? So this reminds me of the same thing where basically they're saying in the paper, any other day you find a man dead on the side of the road, sure. But the second you bring in outsiders to it, it's an assassination. It's, it's manslaughter, which this is before they even went to court. So just like that,
it's just getting everybody all
riled up. As usual. It seems like in this time it was just common practice to wildly speculate and then make the facts line up with the speculation, which is kind of like in some TV shows and even in some cases that you see where the person that they want to accuse, they make it line up to the crime.
They make it too neat and tidy.
They try to backtrack. It's like you find the person that you want and then figure out how they did it.
I was thinking that.
So that's kind of how this seems in this time. At any rate, the men were held in jail for 5 months before they were tried in court and weren't granted a defense attorney until 48 hours before the trial.
That's not cool.
If we remember, again, back to Levy Weeks, this was still in the time that you were appointed an attorney, and it wasn't uncommon for a judge to not allow you to obtain your own counsel. While Weeks' trial, as we did talk about before, kind of set a precedent for defendants to have the right to counsel, it was still not widely accepted. Keep in mind that case was in New York. This is in Massachusetts.
Right. And also, he was granted counsel.
Mm-hmm.
But
exactly.
He didn't have very much time to prepare. And I say he because we all know that there were not women who practiced law at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this,
baby steps.
This
baby steps.
Exactly. And with saying that, a judge allows you the right, also keep in mind, these are Irish immigrants in a mainly, British Protestant. Yeah, you're in a British Protestant area. These are Irish immigrants, and it's very easy for a judge who has prejudice against them to say, no, you don't need attorneys. Or, well, we'll give you some, but it's going to be 48 hours before your trial. I mean, you don't
we're going to tick the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to check and say, oh, we gave them that.
Yeah, we'll give you what we're supposed to, but it's going to be in our own time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just sad. So there were 2 justices of the Supreme Judicial Court convened to hear the trial for the men. The first being Judge Samuel Sewell, who was a direct descendant and namesake of one of the main judges in the Salem witch trials.
Interesting.
Yeah, I saw the name Samuel Sewell, and I was like, I know that name. So yeah, he's a direct descendant of one of the judges for the Salem witch trials. Very fitting in this situation, I might add. The second was Judge Theodore Sedgwick, like Kira Sedgwick, like that's married to Kevin Bacon, like that last name, whose house was the first to be destroyed during the farmers' uprising in the Shea Rebellion. So people didn't love him.
There you go.
The trial couldn't be held in Springfield due to the already prejudiced feelings towards the men before the trial began.
Shocking.
Right. So this is a instance of, I literally just had change of venue. This is, I know, I just had that in my head and then it popped in. So
if you could have seen that on her face, it was something to behold.
I know. Welcome. This is just me. So yes, this is a case where...
Are you still Kayla?
Mm-hmm, always.
Okay.
Every day.
It was like a new person came in. It was great.
It's like it zaps in my head all of a sudden. So because they moved it from Springfield to Northampton, this is what's called a change in venue, which a lot of times will happen in a case, and sometimes defense attorneys will, and I know we probably have attorneys that are listening that are cringing at the way I'm describing this, but
we apologize for that.
Yeah, I apologize, but even though I probably should have gone to law school, I didn't.
This is never too late.
I know. That's what my boyfriend always tells me. Is that he's like, you totally should have gone to law school. But a change of venue is basically when the defense attorney presents to the court, or really to the judge, to change the trial to a different location due to the wide knowledge of that case in the area. There's a lot of instances where some judges will not allow it. There are some cases where they do, and they change it to a different county. If anybody is familiar, with some different cases out there, and I can think of a few off the top of my head, but where maybe some people wanted to change because of racial issues. They wanted to change a case from a majority white county to one that has more diversity, to where, because think about it. I mean, a jury is supposed to be a jury of your peers.
Right.
If there are no peers in that jury, it's not a jury of your peers. So it kind of works both ways, where that could happen and you would want to change a venue for that reason. a lot of people will do it because they are in a more diverse county and they want it to be a majority white county. So they will try and move it to a different area because they want that jury pool. So a lot of different reasons of why it could happen. It could be malicious. It could not be. I know that in a lot of other trials, there's some places that you couldn't get a change of venue. I don't think the OJ case, I don't think they even asked for a change of venue in that one. I could very well be wrong about that, but
Never.
But there's a lot of times where, they'll ask and the judge will not grant it because there's no basis for it. But when there are very well-known cases around an area, it's not a bad idea to try and get that change of venue because you do want an unbiased jury.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in this case, you weren't going to get an unbiased jury.
And that's unfortunate.
So they changed the venue to the Northampton Meeting House, which was in the same town that the men were being held in jail. Thomas Gould and Edward Upham were the two men appointed to defend Daley, and Halligan's attorneys were Habos. Don't know. Could be wrong. Probably wrong. Going past it. But
took your best shot.
Yeah, his last name was Upham as well, but it doesn't appear that he was related to the one he was not related to the other attorney, who also had the same last name, and Francis Blake was the youngest attorney on this case. And
I was thinking of Sir Francis Drake.
Francis Blake.
I'm sorry.
These names in this, I can't.
I know. I'm sorry.
You get George Clinton, or you get anyway.
I was like, what does he have to do with it? Oh, she did say that.
So this is a case. Sorry, attorneys. I believe now when you try a case, if it's a capital murder case, I believe you have to be an attorney for a certain amount of time before you can be a defense attorney for a capital murder case. From what I found in my research when they were talking about it, the main thing that they said was that Francis Blake would not today be allowed to try a capital case because of his experience. He didn't have enough experience to try. So I believe that's what it is. Could be the same today. Could be wrong. Probably wrong. Moving on.
I was an education major. I got no clue.
Attorney General James Sullivan prosecuted the case with the help of John Hooker. The trial doesn't have any official transcripts that have been found. There was an account by a, quote, member of the bar of Hampshire County that is mainly written just as questions and answers. But other than that, it's the only records really found for this case were the recorded verdict and receipts for the trial expenses. Other than that, there's really no firm transcripts as to everything that people said. But this is what we can glean from what happened. There were 24 witnesses called by the prosecution, and from the few records taken at the time, this is what we can kind of surmise happened.
Wait a minute. How'd they find 24 witnesses?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, continue.
Moving on.
Just a thought. Just a thought. Okay.
It can exactly. It's crazy. So definitively, it can be said that Marcus Lyon was killed on November 9th, 1805 by a combination of factors, which included being shot by a pistol, a large rock being placed on his head, and his head being immersed in the water. The day of the murder was very cloudy, and the road Lyon was found, he was not found far off of the road, but it was a very busy road that was traveled by like hundreds of people a day. The 13-year-old boy said that he saw two men around 200 feet away in, quote, sailor's garb on the road near where Lyon was murdered at around 1 p.m. Several minutes later, the 13-year-old saw two men with a horse around 100 feet away from him. But he couldn't say that they were the same men he had seen just before in sailor's garb, which to me, were they wearing sailor's garb when you saw them or were they not? Because 13 minutes they changed and all they had on their shoulder was a bindle. What? Anyway.
Which I now know is a bag on a stick.
Yep. So the horse the men had with them looked like the one that John Bliss had found in his pasture the next day. The boy lived around a quarter of a mile from the scene of the crime and said he never heard a shot go off. He was chasing hogs when he came upon one of the men that he saw with the horse, and then the boy ran home because he was cold. It's cold in Massachusetts in November. So Daley and Halligan were identified.
Why was he chasing hogs?
He lived on a farm. He was doing it, like chasing them to like corral them into an area. But that's what they said it as, is that he was chasing hogs. But yes, he was kind of corralling them.
I was just making sure. That does not sound like a fun pastime, because hogs can be mean.
Ooh, they can be real mean. So Daley and Halligan were identified by the boy in a lineup right after the men were arrested. But when the lineup occurred, Daley and Halligan were the only two in shackles.
And probably the only two that he'd never seen before.
That is a possibility. But to me, if you've got a lineup of, say, 7 men,
and two of them
have handcuffs on, you're going to think, maybe.
Two of these things are not like the others.
It's very weird. Which, again, guys, if y'all could listen to our talks beforehand, just again, the said where they said a lineup just reminded me again of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. When, if you haven't looked it up, give it a goog. And give it a goog. And Leah doesn't listen to True Crime Obsessed, guys, if you can't tell. So give it a goog. And it's the Brooklyn Nine-Nine police lineup. Ain't nothing but a now number 5. So anyway, she's like, number 5. Number 5's the one that shot my brother. Oh, I forgot about that. If you have not watched it, one of the greatest cold intros to a show of all time, and it makes me laugh every time. So
you're welcome for that little song.
We don't have rights to it, so we can't sing more than 8 seconds.
That's
can't be sued. We don't have money, guys. That money.
We got Nan.
No, we don't make money for this. If you would like to go to our Patreon, I'm just kidding.
We still ain't got Nan.
Nope. So anyways, the 24 witnesses were only asked 24 witnesses, right?
24.
Were only asked 44 questions total by all 4 of the men who made up the defense team.
Nice.
That is less than 2 questions per witness.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. The defense team was not able to call any witnesses to the stand because of the short amount of time they had to prepare before the trial.
That was helpful.
48
for their
hours.
Case.
Yep.
Very helpful for the defense.
Mm-hmm.
Very helpful.
So also at the time in criminal cases, the defendant could not take the stand in their own defense, and the accused was named, quote, incompetent to testify. It wasn't until 16. Not 16.
Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
They were incompetent to testify. If they're incompetent
on their
to
own
testify on their own behalf, does that not mean like they're meaning like mentally
like
incompetent?
Insanity? Yeah.
Then they should be, given some mental health. Oh wait, I'm sorry.
That's not a thing.
That's not a thing. I'm sorry. That was a devil inside of them or something. I do believe in the devil. I'm sorry that came out wrong, but
that's back then. You were possessed.
Yeah.
Like people who had schizophrenia, they would do, they were possessed.
Yeah.
Not the case. But yeah, they would say that if you were the defendant in the case, you did not have the right to go to the stand to defend yourself because you were incompetent to testify.
Infuriating.
And 60 years later, the law was changed. 1860. So this was in 1806. So 1866, this law finally changed where a defendant could actually go up and testify on their own behalf for their own defense. So basically,
not that it would have helped him anyway,
no,
really.
But how frustrating is that? You don't have any time to call anyone to the stand. And
I mean, at least he would have had a shot. At least he could have said something.
Either
and at
one
least
of them could have
said something.
But it wouldn't have. Unfortunately, we'll find out. It wouldn't have helped.
I'm sorry. I just breathed all in the microphone.
Sorry. Halligan's attorney, Francis Blake, argued on behalf of his client, and he said this to the defense. It's a little long, but for this to be the youngest attorney of the four that were there for the defense, this is a very good kind of closing statement. Quote, I allude to the invertebrate hostility against the people of that wretched country, and from which the prisoners have immigrated, for which the people of New England are peculiarly distinguished. Pronounce then a verdict against them. Tell them that the name of an Irishman is among us but another name for a robber or assassin. That every man's hand is lifted against him, that when a crime of unexampled atrocity is perpetrated among us, we look around for an Irishman. That because he is an outlaw, with him the benevolent maxim of our law is reversed, and that the moment he is accused, he is presumed to be guilty until his innocence appears. The mind is infected in common with others with that national prejudice, which would lead him to prejudge the prisoners because they are Irishmen. All that to say, this is not an arrest of you are innocent until proven guilty. You saw these men were Irish and you said they were guilty before they even came in here. And so that's what he's saying is anytime anything happens in this area, we look around for someone who's Irish because surely they did it. Don't call me Shirley. But, you know,
that's one of my sister's favorite jokes.
But, you know, it's like, oh, okay, so anytime anything happens, and it's what he's saying is very true.
Yeah.
Anytime something happens, you're looking around for someone who's Irish.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not, it's very frustrating.
It is frustrating, but it's true. And I mean, to an extent, it still happens today.
Oh, yes.
Maybe not Irish, but in different situations, it still happens. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating when you see that and you're like, really? You know, why don't we follow some facts? Why don't we really use our brains and really, you know, see what the truth is and not just assume because this person is this way or,
which
we'll
say it, just because
trait.
This person is black or they're a person of color or
they are Asian
or they are under the poverty line or, you know, just because of
that's why I didn't say anything in specific because there's so many different
ways that it can be. I mean, just like a lot of people in this country, it's you have money, you can get out of it. I mean, that's how a lot of people see it. And if anybody knows anything about Robert Durst and his trial, which if you don't, such a interesting case. And there's a docuseries called The Jinx that's very good. But I mean, he got away with a lot of things because his family is one of the most wealthy families in New York City. And so, you know, it's unfortunate. But I mean, what this attorney is saying in this case, unfortunately, is no different than what an attorney would say today. Yeah. And that's sad.
Yeah. And I mean, it isn't always the case, but it still does happen.
It does. And that's unspeakable. Like that should not be.
It's ridiculous. And I will say one good thing is it has changed that you do get a lawyer more quickly.
You do.
You know, I have people
you can get a public defender.
Yes, I was going to say I have people that I'm close with that have been that public defender. And it's so funny. I have one of my close friends was a public defender, and I I was running errands and happened to be somewhere that I could pick up pictures for them, and I was picking them up, and the person was like, "Well, what are you getting?" And I told them, and they were like, "Well, what all were they?" And I was like, I don't know." And then they looked it up, and they were like, "Oh, were you getting this 8x10?" And I was like, "They're in court. I can't get in touch." And they were like, "Oh, what do they do?" And I said, "Well, public defender." They're like, "Oh, I'm putting it in there anyway. They're on the right side." It was so funny. I was like, "Well, okay." And turned out they didn't order it, but he was like, "We just gonna throw it away anyway. They on the right side." So, but yeah, I mean, today they do have the public defender.
God love public defenders.
Oh.
That if there is anybody to say you were doing the Lord's work as a public defender, it is thankless. You are not making.
Well, but it's not really thankless. It's really not. I mean, maybe
I'm saying from other people, other people outside, not necessarily from your clients. I'm saying from outside perspectives, like in cases where DHR is involved, or for people who don't know child services, people look at the public defender as the bad guy, and it's like this job is so much harder than you could ever imagine. Because also think, guys, you're a public defender. You also don't have control of how many cases you have.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they just keep pushing them on you.
I have close friends that are public defenders too, and that is hard. Oh my gosh, that is a hard job.
And it's cases that, as a public defender, because you don't have, and I know this is on a tangent, but this is something that Leah and I both are passionate about when it comes to this subject because of different things in our lives. Sorry, guys, that's Claire. That's
she's the research assistant.
She's the research assistant. She's come to see how things are moving along over here.
Make sure that all her points are covered.
Yeah, she wants to make sure that her research was put in properly. But yeah, not to get off on a tangent on this, but Lee and I, we're when it comes to the court system, we're very passionate also about public defenders and people who are in those positions, district attorneys, different things like that your job is so hard.
Yes.
So hard.
They see, they hear
all of it and don't have control over what cases you really take. It's not like, a private attorney who you can go, "Oh, I'm not trying that case." Yeah. You can't, you took an oath to defend. I mean, just like a doctor takes an oath, they take the Hippocratic oath to not harm a patient, it's the same thing. And it's just, it's unfortunate that a case that is in 1805 can still pull commonalities with the court system today.
And I am so happy that I can say that, Claire really wants to talk. She is all up over my microphone. There have been improvements since then.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to be able to say that. While no justice system is going to be perfect, I'm very happy to say that there have been improvements.
Yes.
In law enforcement and in the justice system, easy for me to say, as a whole. So
yeah, I mean, nothing's going to be perfect, and there are things that
and there are going to be people who
you can't
make things difficult.
There's going to be a bad apple in everything, and there's going to be, guys, sorry, Claire has decided she is going to be the center of attention for this episode. She could be Irish. I don't know. I don't know what her passion. This is a passion project for her, I guess. She's demanding attention.
It's cracked me up.
And she's such a funny cat too. She is not one that likes attention or being touched. So the fact that attention's not on her is obviously real big issue right now. So anyways, back to our case, Claire. Can we go back? Are we good? Okay, I think we have permission now. But yes, like we said, there's bad apples in every situation. There are things that do need to be reformed, that there are changes that do need to be made.
And the systems are always changing and growing, and new things are always coming up.
Yes, always. And it's just, it's it's not a job I'd want to do.
Ugh.
I certainly, but
Ooh, I want to turn off work when work is done.
Yes. That is one good thing about our day jobs is that we don't take them home.
Nope.
Even though Leah works from home, she can close it in her office.
Yes. I mean, my phone calls do come to my phone, and I'll still answer the phone, usually.
But, so yes. So back to off on our tangent rabbit trail. Edward Gould, who was the main attorney for Daley, declined to address the jury after Blake's speech because he said, quote, "The evening has far elapsed." So
he sounds a little pompous.
Mm-hmm. So out of the 4 men, quote, defending Halligan and Daley, only one of them directly addressed the jury. Just one. Which is just insane to me. Before the jury was dismissed for deliberation, Judge Sedgwick essentially commanded that the jury come back with a guilty verdict, which is what we saw in Levy Weeks' trial as well. Remember, they went off and he basically said, he's not guilty. So don't say that there's not a case. There's no evidence. So apparently this was common practice back then. Sedgwick stressed the importance of the testimony from the 13-year-old boy, said, quote, "If you believe this witness, gentlemen, you must return a verdict of conviction." And yes, he said gentlemen because this was a time when the only people on the jury were going to be men.
Because they were the only ones competent enough to make such a decision.
Love it.
That was said with sarcasm, just in case it did not read.
Exactly. The judge went on to say that the boy's testimony had always been consistent, which was a lie. And the trial itself lasted from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m.
At least it wasn't 2 days.
I know. After only a few minutes, the jury came back with a verdict of guilty for both men. So,
was it 5 minutes?
It didn't say how many minutes. They just said a few. So the following day, the men were sentenced to be hanged by the neck until they were dead, and their bodies to be dissected and anatomized. So basically, use them as an autopsy practice.
Okay, here's my question. That is very sad, but we did know that was the ending. When they say hang by the neck until dead, I mean, do they sometimes say hang by the neck until they were gurgling and then cut it? I mean, why do they have to say until dead? I'm really just curious.
Honestly, I do think that in a lot of cases, what some people see, if it's not done correctly, I know there had been some times when they would cut the person down because this could get a tad graphic for a second, guys. So sorry. So when someone is hung, the mechanism of action for it is that your neck is broken, which then severs, your spine.
You're paralyzed.
Exactly. And so if it is not done properly,
you have a life of misery afterward.
Well, you don't have a life of misery, but your death is very, very slow if that's not what happens. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of times when executioners would see that the hanging did not go the way it should have, that the noose was not placed properly or something like that, they would cut them down out of passion, I guess, for compassion for that person. And so I think that was an issue in some places where that would happen. And then what do you do? So unfortunately, I think they had to put it into law that it had to be hanged by the neck until death. They must be there. Because if it's a difference of a death by just force or basically by suffocation.
Okay.
And
I
that can
was-
last for several
Gotcha. Like
minutes.
it's a hanging gone wrong, but still
Very
it has to
wrong.
be a hanging. I gotcha.
So
I was just curious, why that was put in there specifically.
yeah, and I've heard of a few times where that has happened to people, but I believe they were just re-hanged again. But I also think too, there could be some pushback from people who could have been like humanitarians who were like, this is wrong, we can't. So I think it was kind of like, once we take the
first step.
Yeah, once we take the floor out from under you, that's it. Like we're, this is it. Could be wrong. Maybe. Don't know. That's what I've seen before, and that's what I've researched.
I was just very curious about that particular. It's like, there's a phrase that they use in the news all the time.
Shot to death?
Yeah. Shot and killed.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. Shot to death. I mean, because just because you're shot doesn't mean that you've been killed.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another one that seems silly to me. I'll remember it after we're finished.
I don't know. My wonderful college professor was the one that always told me to never say completely destroyed, because destroyed means that it's not there. So anytime that anyone on the news or in a show says that it's completely destroyed, I cringe, because it's repetitive. It's like when you order a chai tea latte, you should just be ordering a chai latte, because chai means tea. So again, weird things that I have issues with.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was curious.
So a local paper reported the scene in the courtroom that day, saying Daley seemed to be in some degree agitated, and immediately after the sentence was pronounced, fell upon his knees, apparently in prayer. But Halligan, who previous to the trial was by many supposed much the least criminal of the two, exhibited stronger marks of total insensibility or obstinance and hardened wickedness that N often witnessed. The men wrote a letter to Father, I believe it's Chiveris. He was a prominent Catholic priest in New England. And they said, quote, "If we are not guilty of the crime imputed to us, we have committed other sins, and to expiate them, we accept death with resignation. We are solicitous only about our salvation. It is in your hands. Come to our assistance." So
like asking him to come hear their confession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
kind of like final rights, that kind of thing.
So the father came and he made the journey to the men and arrived a few days before their execution in June of 1806. His arrival to the area was not welcomed, and the hatred of Catholics in the area was so strong that Father Chiveris couldn't find a place to stay in the area. He stayed in the prison for a few days until a local man, Joseph Clark, accepted the priest into his home.
A priest wouldn't accept a priest into their home.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
gets better.
Silly.
Clark was criticized and despised by many people for even taking the priest in. Over the next few years, Clark's wife died, and his house was hit by lightning and burned to the ground. And the townspeople were satisfied with the terrible events, and they said that it was the wrath of a vengeful God for him taking in a Catholic.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. So, on June 5th, 1806, 15,000 people traveled to Northampton to witness the execution of James Halligan and Dominic Daley. The population of the town at that time was only 2,500. Just
wow.
Bring in everybody. It's fine.
Wow.
Father Chiveris heard the last of the confessions of the men before their death, and the priest asked the High Sheriff of Hampshire County if the two men could each have a razor because they wished to die clean shaven. So this was apparently something that these men shaved often. And so, yeah, it's it's interesting because the priests had to promise to watch the men and stated that they would not take their own lives with the razor before their scheduled execution. The sheriff was hesitant because he had a crowd of 15,000 people outside waiting to see an execution.
I mean, they wanted their entertainment.
But the sheriff agreed, and under the watch of Father Severus, the men shaved for the last time. There was an odd custom in 1806 before executions. It was common for the prisoners to go to a church where they would hear their eulogy before their execution. But the amount of people in the town that day didn't allow for the men to go to a church in town, and the service was held in the meeting house instead. This is the same meeting house the men were sentenced to death in just a few months prior.
Not a very happy place for them.
The windows were taken down so people outside could hear the church service as well. A minister from the town stood to deliver the funeral address for the men, but Father Severus relented and said that as the clergyman for the two men, he should be the only one allowed to speak.
Good for him. It
gets better.
Oh, do we like it? Do we like Father?
Yes.
Severus? Okay, good. I thought maybe we did.
Oh, we love him.
Good.
He definitely, this is a speech for the books.
Oh, good.
So Father Severus began the sermon saying, quote, "Orators are usually flattered by having such a numerous audience, but I am ashamed of the one now before me. Ooh. Are there men to whom the death of their fellow beings is a spectacle of pleasure, an object of curiosity? But especially you women, what has induced you to come to this place? Is it to wipe away the cold damps of death? Is it to experience the painful emotions which this scene ought to inspire in every feeling heart? No, it is to behold the prisoner's anguish, to look upon it with the tearless, eager, and longing eyes, and I blush for you. Your eyes are full of murder. You boast sensibility, and you say it's the highest virtue of women, but if the suffering of others affords you pleasure, and the death of a man is entertainment for your curiosity, then I can no longer believe in your virtue. You forget your sex. You are a dishonor and a reproach to it."
Dishonor on you, dishonor on your family,
cow.
Dishonor on your cow.
So,
I love it.
Oh, he's not done.
Oh.
Surprisingly, all of the women who were there left. They were done. At 3 p.m, the two men were taken to the gallows, where Daley, Dominic Daley, read a prepared statement before his execution. And he said, quote, "At this awful moment of appearing before the tribunal of the Almighty, and knowing that telling a falsehood would be eternal perdition for our poor souls, we solemnly declare we are perfectly innocent of the crime for which we suffer or any other murder or robbery. We never saw, to our knowledge, Marcus Lyon in our lives, and as unaccountable as it may appear, the boy never saw one of us looking at him at or near the fence, or any of us either leading, driving, or riding a horse, and we never went off the high road. We blame no one. We forgive everyone. We submit to our fate as being the will of the Almighty, and beg of him to be merciful to us through the merits of his divine Son and our blessed Savior, Jesus Christ."
And he was not lying.
No. So the statement then was given to the high sheriff, and then Dominic Daley and James Halligan were hanged.
Wow.
So that means a lot, considering they wanted Father Severus to come there and said, "We want you to be here because while we did not do this, we have other sins that we want a clean slate." And so for them to then get up on a platform
after they have done their confession
and say, "We did not do this."
Yeah. Y'all have sentenced us to death. And, hey, we're going through with it, but we've already done our confession.
Yep. And we did not do this.
And, hey, by the way.
So, it's, At the turn of the 20th century, a historian, James R. Trumbull, not any known relation to John Trumbull, who was the famous painter who painted a lot of the founding fathers' portraits and stuff like that, he alluded in some writing to a deathbed confession of the murder by a Hampshire County man, which said, quote, "Years afterward, on his deathbed, the real murderer of the man acknowledged his guilt and vindicated, too late, the innocence of the lads who were executed for the crime." So it's popularly believed that the deathbed confession for the crime that, Halligan and Daley were executed for was, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Because I don't think you're ready.
It's a little boy, wasn't it?
Was made, so the deathbed confession was made by the uncle of the 13-year-old boy.
I knew the little boy was involved somehow. I knew he was.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said he didn't hear a gunshot, and there's no way he didn't hear a gunshot. There's no way that he wouldn't have heard it.
Yeah. So, it's believed that it was his uncle that did it. On St. Patrick's Day in 1984, 179 years later, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis proclaimed the innocence of Daley and Halligan and issued an official exoneration for the two men.
Little late.
That always aggravates me. I understand the sentiment and I understand that, but it's just like, oh, okay, what does that do now? I mean, what?
That doesn't give the kids their daddy back.
No, I mean, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't give any justice to the person who actually did it. They lived the rest of their life. I mean, it's just crazy things like that I go, huh?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, think about the wife that lost her husband and then had to figure out how to raise her family.
Mm-hmm.
How many
and
kids?
And a mom
2 kids?
He had one child.
One kid, yeah.
A wife, his mother, and his brother.
Yeah,
all
I was going to
living
say
with him.
that, there was a whole, family.
You just destroyed a family.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, people who falsely accuse someone else.
How do you live with yourself?
Exactly. How do you go through knowing your accusation, one, executed 2 men, okay?
Not even they got in a little bit of trouble and had to pay some money. They died.
They died. But even if you're not executed for something, if you're accused of something that you did not do, how does the person who accused you, how do you sleep at night? Knowing that the words that came out of your mouth destroyed the life of someone else. I don't understand.
And so many other people
Mm-hmm.
made such a huge impact. What kind of impact did it have on the kid of the dad? How many? What kind of an impact? Did it impact his ability to get an education because they had to go into a trade because dad wasn't there to make money? Because at that time you had to buy an education. You didn't get a free education. I mean, ugh.
It's very frustrating.
It's so far-reaching.
And
so far-reaching.
And for the main person who is accusing you, for it to be their family member who actually committed the murder, you are perpetuating a cycle of prejudice just towards the Irish. Just like his attorney said, someone's murdered, you look around for an Irishman.
Absolutely.
Don't let that be your legacy.
Absolutely.
And that is exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
because he knew it would work.
It's so frustrating.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy. So that's episode 7, guys. Thanks for sticking in there with us. We know we had some tangents today. We had some interruptions by Claire, who she's napping now and does not care.
Nope.
She's quite happy. So thanks for sticking in there with us this week. It's been a been a tangent, been a rabbit hole, but a fun one.
Happy, but it's okay.
So we appreciate y'all sticking in there with us. Follow us on Instagram at One Nation Under Crime and on Twitter at ONUC Pod. If you love our podcast as much as we do, please follow us on your preferred podcast platform and recommend us to everyone.
Everybody.
And if you feel like it, please leave us a 5-star review. And if you leave a comment with it, somehow it means more. I don't understand algorithms.
But we like them.
We do. So, and we love to see...
Not the algorithms, the comments.
The comments. We love to see, the things that y'all love about the show. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah. We do have a Patreon. If you would like to help with the cost of making and hosting the show, you can always donate. Just search for One Nation Under Crime on Patreon. If you have a question for us or a story you want to tell us or comment, you can email us at onenationundercrime@gmail.com. We love to read them. We will respond. Also, if you message us or talk to us on Instagram, we'll talk to you back. Don't worry about it.
We will.
We would love to hear from some of you, especially our international listeners.
Absolutely.
I'd love to know where y'all are from. How'd you hear about us? Of course, also our American listeners as well. I don't know how y'all found us all the way in Washington or California or in Rhode Island, but hello, we love you. Thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of One Nation Under Crime. We will see you here, same time,
new crime,
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all. We will see you guys next week.